In today's episode of Accessible Astrology,
Learning about the rising sign method and applying to my life, I think can really help somebody, especially if they're in a phase of their life where they feel maybe lost or they're like, which direction am I supposed to go? When I found the rising sign group, we were all very lost. It was during COVID. But even now, I think about the importance you put on learning the first, the fourth, the seventh, and the 10th house. Right there is so much information for us if we feel like, I don't know what career to go into. I don't know what type of home I should keep. I don't know what type of, person I should be in relationship with. I don't know how I should take care of my body best for me. Like all of that information in some capacity, you can find it in these houses, and you want to be able to find it if you weren't using your rising sign and the way you directly teach us how to work within that method. And
Mhm.
so I guess that'd be my biggest takeaway. It's helpful regardless, but if you're in a phase where you want some direction in regards to those topics, I think it's super helpful for that and super affirming, especially if you feel like you might do something that's a little people won't expect this from me. This is a little off. It might be incredibly aligned and you just don't know it. You haven't opened yourself up to that sort of thing yet.
welcome to Accessible Astrology, where we make astrology digestible and understandable. A podcast where you learn all about the rising sign method, the breakthrough approach I have created over 15 years of working with thousands of clients, studying hundreds of thousands of charts, working with tens of thousands of students, and hundreds of people in our rising sign groups. Here, it's all about learning who you are versus who you think you're supposed to be. In today's episode, I'm going to give you the top 3 reasons why it's important to connect with people who share your rising sign. My guest, Kacy, was not clear about what it meant to be a Sagittarius rising until she found Accessible Astrology and the rising sign method. Once she discovered the rising sign method and connected with other members of her Sagittarius rising group, Kacy finally understood, this is who I am and this makes sense. This group validated her and gave her comfort throughout her journey with other individuals who were Sagittarius risings. She's going to tell us how she did it so that you can do it too. But first, let's talk about the top 3 reasons why it's important to connect with others who share your rising sign. The top 3 reasons why connecting with others with your rising sign group is most important. The first reason, validation. The second reason, non isolation. The third reason, acceptance. So, what happens in our rising sign method groups? We have an opportunity to meet people who walk a similar life path to you. The first is validation. So often in life, we feel like we're the weird one or the odd duck out. We look at our friends and we compare ourselves. They say comparison is the thief of joy. But comparison is also the source of it. So when you meet others with your same rising sign, you are not only validated about who you are and why the way you are, but you're also validated about what you're going through. The second reason is connection. There's this plague in this world right now called isolation. I'm sure it's always been there where we've gone through life feeling it's just me. I'm the only one going through this. We seek the therapist and we seek the books and we seek the information to find out, is this who I'm supposed to be? Why am I different? Why am I the way I am? In these groups, you find out pretty quickly that you're not alone. You're not alone in your journey. You're not alone in the experiences you're having right now. In that validation and acceptance that come with these groups, you don't feel alone. You have an opportunity to connect with people, not just in our group meetings, but also daily in our app and in our community, where you can talk to individuals about what's going on, get updated with current events that are affecting you and your chart and how it's affecting you in your chart. The third reason is total acceptance. Because in the rising sign method that I have discovered and created over 15 years, I've realized you're meant to walk a certain path based on your rising sign because I've seen it over and over again. And so while I have gone through my life at many times comparing myself to others and looking at, wow, they have this and they're doing it this way, and why can't I do it that way? When you meet others who are going through life in the same fashion as you, that are experiencing similar events and similar feelings and similar insights, You realize I actually am feeling that about myself, and we can accept it. We can watch others accept themselves as well. And just the act of watching another accept themselves, you can also learn to do that for yourself. So, acceptance, not feeling alone, validation. Those are three of the reasons amongst endless reasons why it's important to connect with people who share your rising sign. Right now, you can access our online community totally for free. You can access it through your desktop or through our app. In our free community, you have opportunities to meet with others who share your perspective on astrology, a group of people who want to take their astrological understanding and wisdom to a higher level. You also get daily updates, whether it's current transits or things going on astrologically, to my thoughts on current events and what's going on in the astrology of these events. You also get to meet with me live once a week for about 2 hours every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You also have access to our classroom of endless course material from basics on astrology to specific courses designed for you. Most importantly, we are soon opening up our doors to rising sign groups with a plethora of information on the rising sign method and what it means to be your rising sign specifically. Now, I'm going to be releasing this first to the members of our free community. I'm going to be offering you a lot of incredible opportunities to get into those groups with some extra perks and bonuses if you are currently in our free community. So don't hesitate. Join the hundreds of other individuals who have joined our free community, Accessible Astrology. And I'll look forward to seeing you there. Hi, Kacy. Welcome to the Accessible Astrology podcast. I'm so happy you're here to share your story with myself and the audience. So thank you so much for being here today.
Of course, Eugenia. I'm excited to be here. I can't wait to share all about the Rising Sign group.
Okay, good. Wonderful. So, my first question for you is I would love to know about what your experience was maybe before even encountering astrology, but then what your experience with astrology was before encountering myself and my work and the rising sign method. I'm just curious where you're coming from before you start working with me.
Absolutely. Before I started looking into astrology through social media around 2015, I never really thought about it outside of knowing my sun sign. But even those first like year or two of learning about it on social media, it was very passive, very, I don't know what the word is, superficial, maybe. Just reading like a horoscope here or there. So I didn't really get too into astrology until I started doing more research and looking at podcasts.
Mm.
And I found your podcast. That was one of the first podcasts that I found. So that's when I started taking that a little bit more seriously. And that was probably like in 2016, maybe like mid 2016.
So, right when the podcast started, really, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, geez. That was in the beginning. It's been one of the first few episodes now that I think about it.
Isn't that wild? That's like many years now, right?
It was the podcast that really started making me pay attention more and taking it a little bit more seriously.
Before you started learning a little bit my approach to astrology, did you feel that astrology really spoke to you? Did you feel it made a ton of sense to you? Was there holes? Was there gaps?
I feel like the biggest thing for me was it was definitely gaps because I didn't fully, especially at that age, I didn't resonate with the Capricorn archetype. That's my sun sign and I have stellium in it. And I didn't really resonate with the, yeah, sure, I was ambitious. I worked a lot, but I didn't think I was structured. I didn't think I was reliable, like all those other things that came with it. And so while I was enjoying astrology, I didn't fully resonate with it, but I felt like I was like, well, I'm gonna stick around. And maybe as I find more, it'll resonate more, if that makes sense.
Yes, yeah. I think that's one of the biggest things I keep talking to people about and just always is I don't resonate with my sun sign. You hear that a lot, or I don't resonate with my, or whatever. And then another big one is when people have their houses not in whole sign. Sorry to put down non-whole sign astrology, but there's a lot of this doesn't resonate. My moon in this sign or whatever, or this house doesn't resonate. And then I clicked it to whole sign and it started making sense when my moon or my sun moved into a different house. So, what would you say then? happened when you learned about the rising sign method, when I started teaching you about what it meant to be a Sagittarius rising specifically?
There's a few things. I will say when it came to the Sag Rising, it was in our group, and I can't remember the exact like phrase you used. I hope this is okay to say it, but you described the Sag Rising as, it was like the wounded artist, or
Mm,
like
the
it was the
frustrated artist.
frustrated artist. That's
Yes.
what it was. And when you first said that, I remember it was like we were in our little group, and I was like, because
Mm,
that's exactly what it felt like. Because I had always felt like, and I think this was probably me leaning on the understanding of Capricorn as a Capricorn sun and stuff. I was like, okay, I gotta want to be a boss lady. I gotta want to be a CEO and like it the whole time. I gotta want to do all that sort of stuff. But in reality, I was falling in love with astrology. I like tarot cards and crystals. So it was like expectation versus what I actually want to do in my life. Hearing your view on Sag Risings in that way felt really affirming, was the first thing. Because I was like, what's wrong with me? So it felt affirming that there's that space of frustration. And then also when we moved around, I remember us going to the house.
mhm.
And once we learned about the 10th house and how that sort of makes this impression of always having your together, and it just made a lot of sense as somebody always viewed as having their stuff together and being so successful. And yet I would feel like the fourth house in Pisces more often than not. So it definitely felt affirming, and I was able to see myself a little clearer.
Mm. And when I talk about the rising signs, I'm always talking about the origin stories, your family, how your family raises you, and the conditioning of your family. Did that resonate with that information when I, taught you about the conditioning of Sag rising?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that I remember about the conditioning of Sag rising. I feel like one of the expectations that come with being a Sag rising, or just the, like I said, like looking like we always got together, look like we can always handle it. And I felt like that was my experience in my household.
Mhm.
And then we had a conversation in our group once about the influence of siblings with
Mhm.
Sag.
Mhm.
And that's a big thing for me in my household. Sure, there's the trauma with parents and stuff like that, but the siblings, let's talk about that a little bit. So, again, there was like this affirmation with how I grew up and these experiences that I had that no one ever really seemed to acknowledge when I brought them up.
Thank you for bringing up the sibling piece because it's really interesting. In the 4 years I've been doing this, we've done this with about 500 people, and I've gotten to see so many different stories of so many different people relating to each other and talking to each other. One of the things that has been most surprising is how influential siblings are on the makeup of our psychology, both from children and childhood, but also as adults today. And that's probably been one of the biggest takeaways for me just having these conversations is, yeah, we've talked about parents and relationships and work and all those things, but whenever we get to the third house, the conversations are so full. There's so much people want to talk about, and there's so much they want to express, and then just to have the mirroring of people with your rising sign who have gone through such similar experiences with their siblings, I think is massive because the collective consciousness around, oh, your relationship should look like X, Y, and Z, your job should look like X, Y, and Z. I think the same is true of your siblings, right? Your siblings should just be these buddies of yours that you share life with and you get along with. It's the one relationship you have from cradle to grave. It's the only relationship you have cradle to grave. And it's a massive relationship, but not all brothers and sisters get along like
Mhm.
that. And just how that influences then all your relationships beyond that core one. There's an incredible symmetry of information or energy that echoes past that original relationship with the siblings, which I find really interesting. So you had that similar experience, it sounds like.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny, there's another woman I'm still friends with from the original Sag Rising group. And recently we had the heart to heart about our siblings. I was like, are we related? And I don't know it because our siblings sound like the same person. It was actually a little bit like, oh my God. It was so similar. I told her I'd never heard anyone describe their childhood the same way as mine in such an eloquent way. She put it together so well, too.
Yeah, and I think that's always a helpful thing too, is when you realize your childhood is not, I hate to say this, but not that unique actually. You don't think it's this wildly traumatic or bizarre situation because everyone in your rising sign group has effectively had the same childhood. It makes one feel, I just think, less alone or more gotten in this world. Would you say the same?
Absolutely. When we share that story, like you said, being able to see it in somebody else helps me to not take it so personally, if that's a good way to say
Yeah.
it. Like this is a shared experience. Clearly, there's a vast majority of people experiencing this
Mhm.
thing. So it's a little easier to hold.
Accepting the path that you've been given to walk,
Yeah.
rather than maybe fighting it and wishing your sibling was one way or your relationships were one way or your work was one way, just saying, okay, the analogy I keep using is I might want to be Simone Biles. Like I
Yeah.
might want to be a highly athletic, like 4'8" athlete, but that's
Mhm.
not what God gave me in this lifetime. I've been given a 6 foot tall body and whatever, and I have to work with that. I have to work with the parameters of what I've been given. I feel like the rising sign is the same thing.
Mhm.
It's the same ideology that you've been given a path that has been laid out before you for whatever reason. And your parents mirrored it, your culture mirrored it, your school, just the setting of the environment of the first 7 years of your life primarily that sets you up to walk this certain path and an acceptance that this is my path and that, oh, I actually am on the right path with career. I really am on the right path with whatever. It totally mirrors in the chart based on that rising sign.
It makes me feel like it's a check-in sometimes with the rising sign. Like you said, especially if we're looking at certain houses, it's like, oh, okay. Or like you said, my siblings show up in this certain way, and maybe I feel a way about it, but that's my rising sign. This is what I'm working with. It's the parameters I'm working with. So these are my
Yeah.
siblings, the career I'm meant for. As somebody who's worked in healthcare, Virgo in the 10th house, doesn't mean it has to be a hospital. Maybe I can mold it into another form of healing, but that is my strength. So I'm going to go with it. Mhm.
And you said something earlier about you never resonated with the structure of Capricorn. Do
Mhm.
you, since you've learned about the fact that you're mutable rising, has that helped you accept certain parts of your personality as well? Just that knowing that you're mutable rather than cardinal or fixed rising.
I think it's helped. I think it's helped me accept it, like on a logical way. Like I'm like, yes, I'm mutable. But it's one of those things, okay, so if maybe naturally I'm at a, for lack of a better term, a deficit with certain things, it does make me want to be like, okay, so let me lean into that 10th house Virgo
Mm.
energy, Capricorn energy to get more of it. It's like there's a level of acceptance, but I'm also like, how can I fix it?
Actually, there's a truth to that. I feel similarly. I lean into my fourth house Virgo a lot to get me through the mutability that is my life.
Yeah, I'm like, I gotta lean into. I love the Sag. I love all the things that come with it, but I was like, I gotta lean into this a little bit.
So let me ask you, when you learned about being a Sag rising along the way, before you encountered this method, did you resonate with it? Did it make sense to you that you were?
It didn't make any sense to me. I think a lot of it had to do with the way people talk about rising signs. Like, actually, I will say there isn't somebody I follow who does like Vedic. And I think I might have heard about the ascendant through them first. That interpretation made a little bit more sense than what I was seeing on pop astrology social media. But I don't do that type of astrology. But the pop astrology didn't make any sense. They focus so much on the physical appearance of a Sag rising, which I might have big teeth, but a lot of the other stuff I just didn't really get or didn't seem important. That's the big thing is it just seemed like that's how you look. So I really didn't look at it much at all.
And do you feel like you look like the other members of your rising sign group?
Not at all.
Is that?
Right.
Doesn't make
That's
a lick of sense. Yeah.
yeah.
In theory, it's an interesting idea that all rising signs look alike, but putting them all together, I personally have not seen any relationship whatsoever. You might see a few little things, but in general, I don't really feel like the dress is similar. I don't feel like the appearance, the aura when one walks into a room is all that similar when it comes to the rising sign.
Yeah, no, I agree. I work with at least four people who are Sag risings. We look more different. One's 6 foot tall, one's a short little girl with short hair. We look more different. I agree with you now that I think about that.
So what's that like working with other Sag rising? Do they know they're Sag risings? Do you guys talk about it?
Yes, I'm fortunate. I work with a lot of people who are open to hearing about their charts, or they even have their own charts. I have told them, I look at the chart, like, hey, we have a similar placement. And so they're always just like, what does that mean? I won't get into detail with them, but I think the biggest thing I've heard us come across and share is or that are similar. We've had like similar like childhood experiences and a lot of similar relationships, especially this year. As I was going through my own personal stuff, I noticed that these other Sag risings were experiencing similar dynamic, extreme changes. I was seeing it a lot with fourth and seventh house topics the most.
Right.
Yeah.
Ah, you have the square. That's it.
Jupiter right now. So
That's
that's actually
it.
fun to observe in other people and see how it shows up differently.
Yeah, no, I find it very interesting. I was mentioning, for example, in an interview earlier that right now in my group, those of us with siblings in that age range are all getting married right now. So that's something we all have in common. We're sharing that with each other, we're discussing that with each other. So it's always really interesting when you're in your group and you're talking to people who are going through similar life experiences because you're not alone in the experience.
Yeah, it definitely helped. Us Sag Risings have been leaning on each other for support these last couple months at my job because there is just like
Wow.
similar things going on, and we're able to talk about it. So
Right.
it's something that when I do have that information about people, and I've also been able to guess sometimes people are Sag Risings because I just see it so obviously now. Yeah, it's been interesting and really helpful to be just in community now with a bunch of Sag Risings.
And when you were in the group before, did you find that was helpful there as well, connecting with Sag Risings and in the group? Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said, and the different ways of just being able to see each other, to relate. And it feels like you don't have to explain certain things. Even if you know nothing about each other, completely different backgrounds, somehow there's this language I feel like I speak with Sag Rising sometimes. It's like a knowing that we all tend to get.
I think that is definitely one of the coolest things I've experienced is watching the tribes form, how they talk to each other differently, how they connect. And some of our rising sign groups are very quiet. Some of our rising sign groups, you have to try to stop them from interrupting each other. And that's been really cool just to watch when you all get together, just to see how that interaction takes place and how that flow is very unique to you all. Although members come and go in these groups, there's still a similar vibe all the time. I find it really interesting to observe. And just that feeling of getting gotten, right, is an interesting opportunity to have in life, I think. I like it.
And it's so important, especially in these crazy times we live in now. It's like to be able to come into a community and we might look completely different, and yet we have these shared experiences, and we can put all that down so that we can be in community with each other and support each other in this day and age.
I think it's true because we have people from different cultures, different countries, different backgrounds, different ages, generations. That's been fascinating to watch. And being able to watch people, as you said, on the street who might appear very different with a different identity coming together. There's just a nice shared unity between everyone, which I think is neat. So let me ask you, what would be your biggest takeaway from learning about the rising sign method and being Sagittarius rising through me? What would you say is the biggest takeaway that you might want to share with people from the experience?
I think that my biggest takeaway from the rising sign group, for me, learning about the rising sign method and applying to my life, I think can really help somebody, especially if they're like in a phase of their life where they feel maybe lost, or they're like, which direction am I supposed to go? When I found the rising sign group, we were all very lost. It was during COVID. But even now, I think about the importance you put on learning like the first, the fourth, the seventh, and the 10th house. Right there is so much information for us if we feel like, I don't know what career to go into. I don't know what type of home I should keep. I don't know what type of, person I should be in relationship with. I don't know how I should take care of my body best for me. All of that information in some capacity you can find it in these houses, and you want to be able to find it if you weren't using your rising sign and the way you directly teach us how to work within that method. That'd be my biggest takeaway. It's helpful regardless, but if you're definitely in a phase of your life where you want some direction in regards to those topics, it's super helpful and affirming, especially if you feel like you might do something. People won't expect this from me. It might be incredibly aligned and you just don't know it. You haven't opened yourself up to that sort of thing yet. So,
For example, during the pandemic, you all were going through a lot of similar job conversations.
yes. A lot about businesses and starting businesses and closing businesses. I just thought about a conversation in particular, but it's helped me a lot feel affirmed too. Talking about the 10th house a lot today, but a lot of affirmation with my career and business and the things that I need to do in order to have the type of life I want. I just think the method that you use and the way that you look at the rising sign is just, you're not going to find it well, anywhere else. That's why it's your method. But yeah, I think it's really helpful in that way. Great for direction. Great
Yeah.
for if you're trying to figure out where you need to go in your life.
Well, Kacy, this has been so nice to talk to you, and I'm so grateful that you're willing to share some more of your story. Is there anything else you want to share with anyone before we go today?
I don't think I have anything else to share, but thank you, Eugenia, for having me. I've been working with Eugenia since 2018, I think. The only astrologer I work with. I trust her with my chart considerably, taught me the importance of ethics in astrology as well. There are very few that do that in the way with looking with ethics and that sort of thing with astrology. So you're in good hands with her. I'm glad I could be here to help and support.
Oh, Kacy, thank you. It's been an honor working with you, and I'm so grateful that you're willing to share your story with everybody else here today.
Yeah, no problem at all.
See you in our next group.
See ya.